I'd like to call to order the October 23rd, 2019 Columbus City Council meeting. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on our agenda tonight is a motion for the approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We're at letter C, which is the presentation of public hearing and discussion of the Running Aces Harness Park Hotel liquor license. Jessica, would you please read the newspaper notice?
City of Columbus, public hearing notice, liquor license. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held by the Columbus City Council on Wednesday, October 23rd, 2019 at 7:00 p.m. or as soon thereafter as parties may be heard as required by city code in the City Hall located at 16319 Kettle River Boulevard, Columbus, Minnesota, to review a request by the license applicant for on-sale intoxicating Sunday and 2:00 a.m. liquor licenses. The hearing shall continue until all evidence and testimony has been received. The license applicant is North Metro Harness Initiative, LLC, trade name Running Aces Casino, Hotel, and Racetrack. Property owners are North Metro Harness Initiative and Aces Hotel for the property location 15201 and 15215 Zurich Street. Signed, Lori Spangler, Deputy Clerk, published on October 10th, 2019, and posted on October 10th, 2019.
Thank you. Is there anyone here from Running Aces to present?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, city staff. I'm John Seibert, and I've been hired by Running Aces to facilitate in the process of developing the hotel. And in addition to that, they've asked me to consider looking at the entire premises and how we're going to end up developing it out into the future. This evening, what we're doing is we're here to request a revision to the current liquor license that we have. And the reality is that we needed to do this because we have now added the hotel to the property. And we have guests that are in the casino area as well as in the hotel area that will go back and forth between the two. So therefore, what we've done is we've sat back and we looked at it and we said, what's the most viable way that we can go about doing this? And Running Aces has had a good run with their liquor license over the last 12 years, and they've had no incidences with people leaving the premises with alcoholic beverages. And therein was one of the major concerns when they first originally started the property out there. So we, again, have done well with that whole process and that sort of thing. And so we attribute a lot of that to the fact that we've got a great monitoring system there at Running Aces. We have security guards, plus we have 24-hour camera system. And with the 24-hour camera system, it's not just a quasi-monitoring process, because there is actually a control room, and in the control room there are security guards that sit in the control room and do monitor what's going on in the entire facility. And the amount of cameras that are in the facility are fairly extensive, and they cover probably every inch of the particular facility. In fact, I'll give you just for instance, in the hotel, we have 62 cameras that will be installed. No, none of them will be in the sleeping rooms, but it's about that bad with the coverage that we have on this. Typically, when I develop a hotel, I will put 12 cameras in a hotel of this size. So you can see again that we are definitely doing a very good job of covering the hotel in reference to being able to monitor what's going on in the common areas of the property. We also have contracted with the Running Aces facility to utilize their security system, in other words, their security guards, to walk the premises at the hotel as well as the general grounds around the hotel. They spend well in excess of $1 million a year in their monitoring of the facilities process. So this is not something that they obviously take lightly. It's something that they are very covering very extensively, because it's important to make sure that the guests that are there are doing so in a comfortable environment. Part of the process when we looked at extending the liquor license over to the hotel was, as we also knew that we needed to be able to contain the area. So in containing the area, what we've done is, it's not quite installed yet, but it will be probably next week. We'll have the fence finished all the way around from the corner of the hotel back over to the racetrack. So the area, I think that's described as Area 2 on the site plan. I apologize, I've forgotten the, I'm sorry, Area A3 on the site plan. That area will, if you went out and looked at it today, you'd say, well, gee, they don't have it fenced. It is going to be fenced, and we contracted with the gentleman about 3 weeks ago, and he said he was going to be out in a couple, 3 weeks, so that'll be about now. So it'll be soon enclosed, so that, again, we'll have an entire encompassing of the area so that it will indeed be closed all the way through. The other thing I might draw your attention to is the link between the hotel and the casino. That particular link is such that it's designed to have a walk-through basis on the from the parking lot to the apron, the viewing area, I guess, for the horse track area. And it's important for you to understand the Metropolitan Racing Commission requires us to have access directly from the parking lot to the racing facility without guests having to go through any of the casino area. So this link is designed such that it'll allow the passage of customers directly out to the horse track area. And there will be doors there's sliding doors, and they'll open up, and I believe it's like a 12-foot walkway between on both sides, so they can pass easily through that link out into the track area. Those doors will only be open during the racing periods. They will be closed otherwise. That is a controlled environment in there, so we'll have it heated in the wintertime, and it'll be air conditioned during the summertime. So therefore, we're not going to have those doors open any other time other than for when there is an actual race going on. And there again, that's in compliance with the Minnesota Racing Commission. The practices, again, that the Running Aces has continued to provide for the property, I think, speaks well in the fact that we've been able to monitor and control things in reference to our liquor license. In reading through the very different exhibits and that sort of thing on the documentation that was provided to us, the only thing that we're really looking at, we're in compliance with everything. We feel very comfortable with that. The only issue that we really had is in reference to posting a guard at every single one of the exit points in the building anytime that alcohol is being served. What we've done is we've done a good job of monitoring and making sure that that's not happening. So I would prefer that on Exhibit B, that under paragraph 1, that where it talks about posted, I would recommend to strike posting and put in monitoring. And again, I think that the 12 years that they've done this and the process that they've gone through and making sure that no alcohol does leave the premises and they do a good job of monitoring, I think that's an acceptable request to change the posting change the posting to monitoring. Aside from that, the rest of the things that were associated with the recommendations and that sort of thing on the liquor license, we indeed do agree with. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I have a question. What page is that on? What's the page number on?
That'd be on Exhibit B, and so that would be right after Exhibit A, which is the site plan.
You'll want to refer to the additions, because we did make a few tweaks based on the comments that we received earlier from the racetrack.
Oh, it's A6, page A6.
But I think you're looking at the previous version.
Yep, I am, because
So
that's the
maybe-
one that I was
Can you
given.
read what number 1 currently says?
Yeah, actually, Mr. Mayor and Council, I'd like to present in context of the license, if I could, but I'll wait for that opportunity.
I do have one other question. Is there cameras in the walkway?
Yes, there is.
So-
Yep, from
so
both
when-
directions.
So when the 12-foot area is opened up, there will be somebody monitoring via camera?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's correct.
Mr. Mayor and Council, first to address the changes, and then I'll back up and do the overall context. We, based upon comments we received earlier this week, we wanted to clarify that rather than use security guard, which can, kind of denote somebody who's actually gone through kind of guard training, we changed that to security personnel because we understand that the racetrack uses their trained servers as security personnel and that they serve that function at different times, particularly on race days. So both in number 1 and later in, I think, number 9, we refer to security personnel, and our understanding is that can be an actual guard or it can be a trained server serving the role of security personnel. So that's to give flexibility so that there's not an actual requirement for guard. The other thing that we did, we just made it clear that this is just a change in 4, that the president and CEO or food and beverage manager certifies the requirements for alcoholic beverage services and the security arrangements. Now I want to just address kind of the somewhat long history, and I'll try and make it a short version of a long history. So initially, the racetrack was operating under a restaurant license and still is today. A restaurant license is to be for a space that is compact and contiguous. Most license administrators would say that's an area that has 4 walls, an entrance that can be easily monitored. So almost in the first season, there was a request for outdoor service, and so to kind of stretch the bounds of compact and contiguous, we made sure that it was fenced, we made sure that it was monitored with cameras, and we made sure that on race days, there was someone at the entrances so you couldn't walk out with a drink out into the parking lot. You can imagine, somebody has friends out there, they bought a drink, maybe, they want to walk out with it. And I will agree with Mr. Seibert that there have been no incidents. The only violation was related to underage. It wasn't related to someone going out with alcohol. But we believe that they followed those security requirements from day 1. And then they added the fishing pond, which was a neat concept, the trout pond. Similarly, we required that it be fenced and that it be gated and that the gate be monitored when there was service out there. And now we come to the current situation where we're basically flipping the restaurant license is becoming a hotel license because you can't serve both a hotel and a restaurant with a restaurant license. So we're issuing a hotel license now that allows for the service of alcohol both in the hotel and the restaurant. But in doing that, we have this place where folks can go through on race days, and we thought consistent with the conditions that have operated well with no incidents for 12, 13 years, that there be security. It could be security personnel. It doesn't have to be armed guards or anything, but security personnel at that entrance, particularly on race days. If it's not a race day, there's no need to have extra personnel. So that's the rationale, kind of the short version of a long history, and why we thought it important to have, consistent with this legal understanding that it's compact and contiguous, because it isn't, right? I mean, it's anything but compact and contiguous. It's probably contiguous, but it's not compact by any stretch. So the way we get over that, and the way other city administrators get over that, is to say that it's secured, it's monitored, and there are personnel at key entrances. So that was our rationale. The change that we did make, as I said, is to change security guard to security personnel to give them more flexibility on how they staff that important function.
Mr. Counselor, so I know this is an important feature, safety, or question, or whatever you want to say about the whole deal. So tell me again, instead of security personnel, that is anyone who is trained? So
instead of a security guard posted at the gate,
Yep.
so you don't have to go buy yourself a security guard, you can use any server who is trained. The training methods are spelled out in number 4. So any server on the premises that day who's trained, and they're trained in how to spot people who are over-consuming or underage, can serve that security function. And so you can have, your personnel can take turns, moving from entrance to entrance. I don't know that they would be roving necessarily, but it gives them more flexibility than just having a guard standing there for 8 hours.
And does the city expect them to have somebody, whether it's a waitress who's had the tips training or whomever, sitting right at that point? Or is it somebody moving through and moving around?
Well, our expectation, because it's been our expectation since they expanded those areas, is that somebody would be monitoring that entrance, absolutely. And be there so that, you can imagine somebody going through and you're monitoring on camera and, it's a big facility. So again, this is what your staff is recommending. You can make a change to that, but this has been a consistent requirement from the beginning.
All right. To me, that seems like a little bit overkill. But, so they have to reapply for this license every year, correct?
The license is only good for 1 year.
Yep, every year.
So if we were to strike that or change it and try it for a year without a trained person there, relying on their cameras and relying on their history and their cameras and the people who are around there, because it is only 5 hours 3 times a week, right? Race days are Tuesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays.
That's correct.
Then, and if there were issues next year when they come back to it, are we allowed to put restrictions back on them?
It is, under law, it's easier to place the original restrictions and work from there, but you will be able to, certainly in response to a problem, you could tighten up the language.
Even though I understand what your direction is to this council.
Sure.
I get that.
I mean, I think that one of the questions, and I know that Mr. Siebert doesn't run the operation, but one of the questions to those who do run the operation, has this been an onerous condition? How have you addressed it? This is the first time that we've heard that there's been any problem in having to have that level of staffing. Now, I realize they've expanded the operations, but presumably with the hotel comes additional staff. And I think, to the point that Mr. Siebert made with the Racing Commission, wanting to make sure that people can come through a location that's not the casino, it would also be the expectation of the public that it would be free of perhaps alcohol. People wouldn't be hanging in the hallways, drinking. Rather, they'd be out in the facilities, out on the apron, I don't think the hotel is set up for, the hotel entrance isn't set up for consumption of alcohol. So again, this is a policy judgment. This is just coming to you as a recommendation. So you're free to modify the condition.
Actually, isn't the hotel going to have?
Yeah, the hotel will have a bar located within it as well, so that it can end up serving, the guests at the hotel.
But my point is, I wouldn't imagine that it would be a good operational condition to have people coming in and out with kids and going to with people loitering in that passageway with alcohol. So to the point, it would be helpful to make sure that someone's there to say, you can drink over here, or you can drink in the bar, but please don't consume alcohol in the entrance.
Yeah, and again, this goes towards the monitoring aspect of it and that sort of thing, because they do end up having a lot of guards that are on duty during the time of the races, and they're roving continually around the area. And to that end, we also have a 24-hour desk at the hotel, and they also have the ability to see what's going on through the camera system. So it's, again, one of these where I think that the amount of observation to that particular connecting link is more than adequate, that we'll end up being able to direct somebody to go into that area if there is somebody lingering in it. But it's not a large enough area where people would necessarily linger in it either. So it's one where people are going to end up passing through one way or the other on it.
Yeah, and when we discussed it at a staff level, we had no problem with creating the flexibility on the servers serving that security function. What was our bottom line is the facility is growing. There's going to be more alcohol service, not less. And would this be the time to reduce the requirement that we've had on for a number of years? And that's kind of where we stopped.
And I might add too, though, that the intent is not to change anything that they're currently doing now. I mean, they want to operate the same way they've been operating. And within that, if you required a security guard to sit, or security personnel, to sit at that specific location without being able to get up and walk out of the area and look at the race area and that sort of thing and come back and monitoring the entire area there, then it ends up being somewhat restrictive for them being able to take a good look as to what's going around in the area. So I think that's more of the concern, is the posting aspect says a different thing to them than what they've been doing in the past, where they've had guards and they've had people watching the areas and they've been roving the areas and that sort of thing, and that's what they'd like to continue to do. So there'll be no change from where they're currently at today. And the thing that was a concern is the posting aspect of it, because that implies that a person is going to sit there, and that's what they didn't want to have to do.
The people that are watching the cameras, do they have a way of contacting somebody on the floor?
Yes, most definitely.
So if they saw something, you got 2 cameras pointed at that walkway, right?
Yeah.
So if they saw something,
They'd be on it instantly. I mean, and you need to understand that the nature of this control room, and I appreciate that not many people get the opportunity to see it. I've been in it, I've watched them. And this is a monitor where the tables are monitored, the area is monitored, and they take that aspect of it extremely serious, as you can well appreciate. And so to that end, they do have the ability, if there's something going on, I mean, they have the walkie-talkies and that sort of thing, and direct communication, so they can instantly tell somebody. And I've been to a lot of the races and that sort of thing, and when things have gone on, and I tend to sit back and watch to see what's happening and that sort of thing, and there have been certain instances, and I will tell you, the other night, it wasn't too long ago, my wife and I were out there towards the end of the race season, and there was an incident where somebody had tripped and that sort of thing, and I could not believe how fast people responded to it. I mean, within seconds, there were 3 or 4 people right there. And it spoke to me volumes as to how quickly they can respond to a situation out there. And this is what they're trained to do.
Jenny, Janet, what do you think?
So obviously you've been successful with your program in the past. I thought, so the wording that is currently being put before, you don't have that in front of you, but the change,
We can get them a copy.
would you mind, just so that you can read it and then you can tell us whether or not, they took out the word posted in number 1,
Okay, so that has been removed now?
but you'll see what it says.
That was the intent, was to
Yeah.
create that flexibility.
Yeah.
Clean copy that I can make.
It reads, including gated entrance and exits with security personnel at each entrance, exit during times when liquor is served. The posted is removed.
Okay.
And I think, just, if it were up to me, I think I'd want a definition of what security personnel, that it could be either a guard or it could be a trained server. Because then I think it's really clear that you've got some flexibility there and that either of those meet the requirement. So I guess the question I have for you is whether or not removing the word posted meets your,
It does,
concern.
because if it's a case in point where we're allowed to monitor the area, that's really what we've been doing, and that's what we wanted to continue to do. And unfortunately, I received the original draft,
No,
not the
yeah.
current draft.
No,
And so in looking at it, why, to me, what it said is, a posting says something different than monitoring.
I think though that we have to there's some clarification that needs to be made. On number 1, it says that the entrance and exits will be, the but they'll have security at each entrance and exit during times when liquor is served is available. And I want to make sure we understand that we do want the entrances of the racetrack and the hotel and at the pond. That was the original agreement in order to include those areas, that in fact there were people. And the agreement with the pond is that there would be someone out in the pond area when liquor was being served.
Yep.
It wasn't just monitored, there weren't just cameras in the pond area. And that was the agreement from day one.
And the reason for that is the pond was going to be a place where families could gather around the trout pond, and so originally the proposal was that there would be no liquor service there, and the trade-off for getting liquor service in the pond area was that there would be personnel there at the same time.
Yeah. And to that end, the way this reads, I'm okay with that. And the other side of this is that it is in compliance with what they are currently doing now. I don't want to imply that all they do is monitor. My concern is the posted aspect of it, having somebody actually physically having to sit there and that sort of thing. So if they can rove in the area and that sort, and again, I've been in there when the pond has been open and that sort of thing, there's always personnel there. So again, there's somebody there to be able to take care of things. And there's obviously going to be people that are going to be in the race at track environment area, and as well as going through the link and that sort of thing. So it's one where people are there. I don't want to think that it's just one where we watch the cameras and that's all that's happening. It is more than that.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I think Councilmember Hegland makes a good point. With the two changes that we made, posted being removed, word guard being removed, we believe we are creating the flexibility to match the request and what they've been doing. And Ms. Mersko makes a good point as well, which is the trade-off on liquor service, and particularly in that pond area, was that it would be well monitored and secured. So just my opinion is that they have the flexibility to do what they're requiring with the two changes that we've made.
And do you think it would be wise to include a definition of security personnel that would include security guards and/or trained service staff members?
Yeah, we can add that.
Oh, I would love to have that added, because then a year from now, when we don't remember this conversation, it'll be right there.
So on number one, take out security personnel, put trained personnel, and
Or you could even just put in parentheses after security personnel, roaming
And/or.
security guard and/or trained. So you're defining what security personnel means, and/or trained service staff members.
And/or trained servers.
Yeah, because, I mean, you utilize both.
I think that's all we need is parenthetical and/or trained servers.
Yep.
In both places,
No, you can just define it up in number one, and it will carry through.
and then 9 down here.
Yeah.
Okay.
so do you feel that that gives you the flexibility you're looking for?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So the applicant is happy, staff is happy,
I think we are.
council is happy.
Good resolution.
So would anyone like to make a motion?
Well, do
Okay,
we
is there any
want-
other points on here that anyone would like to discuss?
You have to call for public
I'm sorry?
comment.
Oh, yeah. Or is there anyone from the public who would like to add or detract anything? Then hearing none, we'll close the hearing with the right to reopen it if necessary, if somebody gets caught with a drink. And council, any more discussion?
Nope.
Anything? And you feel that we're protecting the city?
I do. I'm comfortable with the additions that have been offered, and I think that clarifies what the intent is. It still requires that those areas be secured, and that leaves them some flexibility in how they accomplish it. We would also ask you in your motion to include the food and beverage licenses.
It's the agreement, the food
Oh,
and
the-
liquor vendor service agreement.
Let's take that separate, as a separate motion.
Okay.
These are two separate actions.
What page do we go to, Elizabeth? please.
So that the food and liquor vendor service agreement is in the agenda packet on page 9. And as far as the motion, you would have to include your amendments this evening to condition number 1.
Could I just read that again, and that will probably suffice for the record? So, Mr. Mayor and Council, the council has discussed an amendment to condition 1 that would carry through to condition 9, and that would read, the gated entrances and exits with security personnel and/or trained servers at each such entrance. So that would be the amendment. And if you would take the license first, and then we can address what the second action is.
Ready for a motion?
Yep, so I'll make a motion to approve the North Metro Harness Initiative Running Aces Hotel liquor license at 15201 and 15215 Zurich Street, subject to the conditions listed in Exhibit B of the attorney's memo dated 10/22/19, and with the amendment to condition number 1 that carries through to number 9.
So second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, the second part of this action, beginning on page 9 of your regular agenda, is the food and liquor vendor service agreement. And the reason this is in front of you is going back to that operation of both the restaurant and the hotel. And so North Metro Harness Initiative has held the license for all these years. They will relinquish their restaurant license, and they will get a hotel license by this action. That hotel license can cover both the hotel and the restaurant operation. You can't do it the other way around. So North Metro Harness Initiative will manage all alcohol sales on the campus, both the hotel and restaurant. In order to do that, since there's two separate entities, they have to have this agreement between them. So this is essentially a management agreement or a service agreement between the two parties, the one that runs the hotel and the one that runs the restaurant.
I have a technical question.
Yes,
So the hotel is not officially open,
right.
so the hotel does not exist today. So does this license go in effect on the grand opening day?
No, generally it would go into effect once the operations are inspected, because they'll need to train personnel on both sides of the building. So you would coordinate with the building official to find out when there's adequate food service facilities on both sides, and then they can relinquish, the license is essentially issued, but when they relinquish that restaurant license, they'll be operating under the hotel license. We can coordinate that at a staff level.
So I would say maybe the motion is, then would be amended to say its effective date, what did you say, based on the building permit, occupancy permit?
It would be at least a partial occupancy permit that would allow training on site while the facilities are being finished.
And that would work for us, too.
I think we can just coordinate that at a staff level. I don't think that needs to be in the motion.
Okay.
But you're probably asking that because the draft we have in front of us has an effective date of August something.
Right. And that's the draft, but it'll have to be updated when it's signed.
Okay.
And the agreement can be entered into now regardless,
Absolutely.
even though it's not open yet. So that aspect of it, I think we're comfortable with that.
Yeah, we'll coordinate with the building official to make sure there's adequate facilities, a partial occupancy permit to allow staff in there, and then Elizabeth will take the restaurant license and hand over the hotel license.
And that's the way we've envisioned it as well.
Good.
And it'll be a year from that date?
Yes.
Okay.
So the food and liquor vendor service agreement dates follow the dates of the liquor license, or they're going to be,
It can be entered into after tonight.
okay,
So it could be dated tonight, tomorrow. It's been approved now by the council.
okay.
But we need another motion for that.
They didn't act on the service agreement yet.
No, they did not act on this
Yep, we
one.
need a motion for that.
Okay, so I'll move to approve the North Metro Harness Initiative Running Aces Hotel Food and Liquor Vendor Service Agreement at 15201 and 15215 Zurich Streets, as presented in our council packet.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Anyone have any more questions on anything? When do you?
Just hurry up and get it open, I know.
When do you
Yeah, when it's going to open.
We're working rapidly towards that.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, and I apologize for not having the correct exhibit tonight, so bear with me on that. So thank you very much.
You're fine.
We're down to number 9. We'll have a planning commission report, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. The Planning Commission met on October 16th, and we're back to the billboard. Last month, the City Council had requested that the billboard companies come back with some alternative designs when we had asked them in the ordinance we were looking at for a brick or stone facade to it. And because of the costs associated that the billboard companies were talking about, you guys asked for them to come back with something else. They have not. We did get letters back from both Schubert Hoyer and Clear Channel, and their directions, or the letters, were more items that we could do to enhance the city and signs we could put up. So the Planning Commission decided that we're standing with, we want enhancements to the billboards. We have not finalized it yet. We're still working on that. What we're looking at is having a consistent look to all the billboards, and be that with brick or stone, colors, the way the sign is. One of the items that came up was structurally, and I know the city staff was going to talk to Dennis and see if you have somebody, because of the existing pad that's out there in the foundation, what the cost would be associated with putting up a new structure around the existing columns. So we do plan on continuing next meeting to hopefully finalize this and get this back in front of you so you can finalize it. With that being said, part of this whole thing has, what started it was the can't say the word right now. Moratorium, yes, back a year ago. And with that, final report has been put in front of you. We did approve, the 5 of us did approve it, and it's up to you guys now.
The Planning Commission had a couple of different pictures to look at, as the billboard companies didn't really give a lot of opportunities for alternates. And so I'll just run through the 8 pictures that they did look at, and really they were focusing on the bases of the billboards. And Dennis, this is really what they wanted to know is, from a structural engineer's perspective, whether or not structurally you could put what we call a column cover on a billboard, and whether or not structurally they'd be able to do that without changing the billboard too much. So this was the first one. This was this was to look at, and I know it's not too clear, but looking at the name and whether or not we wanted an actual sign for a name, or whether we just wanted simply letters on the base. And this is more of a masonry, simple, base column cover, and whether they liked that type of structure. The second one was a little bit more decorative. This is more of a stone look, but then it gave it a little bit of dimension. And as you can see, this does have the circular column, which is somewhat similar to some of our billboards. We don't have too many flag billboards. Most of our billboards currently have the middle column, but we do have at least one that I can think of that's in that configuration. This was another opportunity, and this was really depicting whether or not they wanted to see the name more on a plaque, and whether or not they wanted just the name of the city and what font. And this was an opportunity to look at color and whether they wanted it square or round, or how they wanted the column cover. This one, again, was just another opportunity for different materials that could be used. Initially, Clear Channel, what they presented, they wanted to put a square with the city logo in it. And when we first looked at it, the dimension, we have a round column pole, and they kind of had a square sign in it, and it didn't quite fit on the round pole. It kind of just looked like it was kind of out there. And I did find this one where you can, if you have a square sign, you can, if you have a square pole, it kind of works. The other way, it doesn't really work too well, but this was just me being, you can have lots of different column covers, and I've actually have seen this one with the ashtrays, so. This one, I don't remember what city it was in, but this was painted to represent a waterfall. And the last one was more of a design outside the barber shop. So I think the planning commission talked about it for about an hour, 15 minutes, and came up with some criteria that they will present later. And really, Dennis, what their question was is, what will it take to put a column cover, and what structurally do they think they can do without costing? I know we had a gentleman in the audience who thought it was going to cost $20,000 to put a column cover on architecturally.
Yeah, we haven't done any investigation yet. I did speak briefly with one of our structural engineers today. And I had mentioned to her that I'd find out more about what we were being asked to do this evening. But, if you're just putting the cover on an existing pole, it doesn't have it's not adding any structural integrity necessarily. It's more of a facade cover, and it would just actually be more freestanding, so that, when the pole is designed to flex, you don't want to be damaging your masonry or your rock. So, but if we can look more into what it might cost for a base, and it'll depend on the material quite a bit.
Dennis, I think I believe, I was at that meeting, what we're leaning towards. So they've got their big steel 3-foot column. If they put little half brick up it, will what's there now support that? Or what else can they cover it with without having to bring in 100 dump truckloads of cement to add? So do they cover it with just the half bricks? Do they cover it with fiberglass that look like bricks? In the beginning, like that one looks kind of,
Right.
Isn't that fake brick on there, or real brick or something?
It could be.
And of course, they want to minimize their cost of doing it. We realize that. But everyone, I believe, had the consensus, something like that, or the other brick looked, or the Blaine. We looked a lot at the signs in Blaine, that those looked a lot more attractive than just this plain steel poles. So I guess that was the question. With what they have there, what can be done to it without having to structurally change it?
Right. Yeah, Ben had asked me to put him in touch with one of our structural engineers, so I can direct him to the right person.
Yeah.
And I know they were concerned with wind load and
Right.
all that. I believe he said that the pad that it sits on was like 10 by 10 by 10, that the existing footing is.
Yeah, it depends too, if you're trying to attach material to the existing steel poles, or if you're just building
I think they're planning, what they'll probably have to do is, if we go with brick or stone, it's pretty hard to go round. So it would probably be square or rectangle. So it would most likely be a freestanding type
right.
is how they'd be able to dress it up. So then it's the weight, I assume, on the pad. And
And I believe the planning commission was hoping they'd come back with plan A, B, and C. if we build a brick chimney right around it, or if we do a fake brick chimney, or if we do whatever, this is what it amounts to, this is what it'll cost, this is when they start to tip over. They didn't reply with much of
No.
anything that was helpful for us.
From them, it still is it's cost. They don't want to put out any more cost. And then that really, it's not feasible to them to spend the money to enhance what they have here. And that's why the planning commission decided we would like them enhanced.
So hook Ben up with your
Yeah, and then
signage.
they can decide if Ben's going to do more research on, existing information from other billboard companies or other cities that they may have some of that information, or if they want us to come up with some numbers.
Mr. Mayor and Council, the building officials in Blaine and other places where they have these structures could probably tell you how they look at them in terms of whether they've actually amended their codes to account for them.
I have a question, Elizabeth. Is the moratorium end date today?
The 18th, it ended on the 18th.
Okay, so are we kind of now open that if somebody came through with a application, since the moratorium is lifted, we would have to consider it?
You would consider it under the current regulations.
So is there a way to extend the moratorium until we get this worked out?
You had to do it before the moratorium ran out.
Okay.
However,
And essentially, the report that you have in your packet is kind of the end product of that year-long effort.
Somehow I was thinking that the end date was today. That's, didn't know it was the 18th. Okay.
but nonetheless, none of their applications expire until January.
I believe it's mid-2020.
And the way it stands, there are no other areas that these can be erected right now, correct?
The only vulnerable area right now is the community retail district. Because the new ordinance indicates that we will not allow anything in the defined area in the community retail district.
But as I understand it, Mr. Mayor and Council, you're close to done on the ordinance as well, other than this
Yes.
issue.
I think
We are.
this was just-
So you could adopt it with the recommendations that you have now and continue to work with the industry on possible amendments. That way you don't, the other things that you've talked about for 3-4 months get enacted and you're not exposed that way.
I think we should consider that.
I do.
So that's not just accepting the report, but
The ordinance would come forward from the planning commission. That's where it's at right now.
So the planning commission held the public hearing, and then we took testimony from all the billboard companies, and this issue, the column cover, was the outstanding issue, and we gave them a month to respond. And so now this is literally the last issue for that ordinance. Because the ordinance has been drafted, there's been a public hearing, and now we're just waiting for the final language on the column cover. And I think there's language in the
There is.
ordinance, it's just the billboard companies objected, and we gave them some latitude to give us some alternate opportunities of how they could do a little facelift. They didn't give us opportunity, you know what I mean, anything, and we put this together, PowerPoint together, and here we sit with.
So
we
the
were gonna
council's
do.
free to ask that ordinance to come forward at your next meeting, and
So in the report, there is the draft ordinance. It's on page 61. So if we make the motion to accept the report and a motion to accept the draft ordinance as presented, would we be accomplishing the goal that we just talked about?
you'd be very, very close. It should actually be on an agenda so that the public has notice that you're considering adoption of an ordinance, because it was on the agenda as adoption of the report. And I think, given the interest of the billboard companies, you want to, procedurally, you want to make sure that they have notice that ordinance is coming forward and final. I mean, you don't have to give them actual notice, but it should be if you're adopting an ordinance, it should be in the agenda.
So we'll want that on next council
Yes.
meeting's agenda.
I think that's fine, and you can keep your language as it is, as the placeholder, and then if there are amendments that you want to consider, that can be done after the fact.
Okay.
So we'd like to make the motion to
Hold on-
accept.
Hold on, we can make amendment to it after the fact?
Yes, you would be adopting all of the regulations that you've discussed, including the one that calls for the face brick, and then at the time someone comes forward with an alternative, it's kind of on the industry at this point to come forward with an acceptable alternative. You've given them that opportunity for the last 30 or 60 days.
I noticed in here that you had said that on each column, you would say City of Columbus, and I think we talked about just having Columbus on there, so I just don't want to be locked into,
Well, you can make, you, the council, can certainly change that
all right.
at the next meeting.
Okay.
So you'll want to look at those kind of little tweaks that you might adopt next meeting. And that is also another reason to put it back in the packet.
So we're just.
What about the, I'm trying to read this really quickly, but there was a part that said that we were going to go from 20-year back to 10-year. Was that in this portion that we have to adopt? Okay, the problem is if we're asking them to make a structural change and it costs a lot of money, is 10 years enough? And I guess that's what I wanted to.
Well, you can, since this will be on the agenda for 2 weeks, we can basically get that feedback.
Okay.
So it was for 1 year, but then it says duration may be extended by adoption, but I don't know what this says.
It has to, you have to extend the moratorium within the moratorium.
Oh.
So once the moratorium runs out, you've missed that opportunity. But again, I don't think there's any problem bringing this back next meeting, adopting it with any tweaks the council may have, and then you've got your stated goal is to update the regulations. Most of that work is done. And if there's still discussion to occur on the face brick or alternatives, that can occur after adoption. But you're not kind of leaving the door open for the old regs to be in place.
Motion?
So make a motion to approve the billboard report as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
We also have continued our discussion on the mixed-use ordinance and the design guidelines for the Northeast Quad for the high density. Dean, the city planner, brought forth quite a few things, and it was the high, medium, and low mixed use redone in the existing ordinance. So we spent a lot of time kind of going through that, and not enough time maybe on the high-density mixed use, but we are getting closer, and that should hopefully be coming forward sometime very soon. So there's nothing for you guys to do there. One thing, and I might need a little help here, Elizabeth, is for the update for the Metropolitan Council, the comprehensive plan. There was a few items that came up. Now, I believe some of them we were going to, like updating the table for the transportation. Are these all items that I need to address now, or?
So in the summary statement before the Community Development Committee, the Met Council was presented with our summary statement, but there were some items, outstanding items that we had to address, and we were to complete them along with adopting the plan. And so we will do that, whether Hyla tweaks them, or I know Ben has looked at some of the tables. So by adopting the code, we will incorporate those changes.
Okay. And then it's just, once we do approve it, then we have 9 months to redo our ordinances and zoning to be in line with it. So that's all I have. I do see there's some other items on for my presentation, but I don't have any information on those.
So Elizabeth, I guess, under number 9, the second
At our last-
bullet point.
At our last meeting, there were two applications that we continued the discussion for. The first one was for Bear Homes, as the council felt that the building elevations that were proposed still didn't meet expectations. And so the direction to both staff and the council was that we were going to appoint 2 council members to meet with Bear Homes. My understanding, that meeting did take place, and there's a summary of the meeting within the packet. And my understanding to date is that final discussion and building elevations have not been complete, and their request would be to continue the discussion to the next meeting, which would be November 13th. In addition to that, we have issued a extension letter to the applicant, as our 60 days will run out prior to the next meeting, which would be November 13th.
So do we have to take action on this?
You do have to continue the discussion to the November 13th meeting.
Would we need a motion?
Yes.
Yes?
I'll do this one, too.
All right.
So I move to continue the conditional use permit amendment at 14474 Hornsby Street until the next city council's meeting on November 13th, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The next item is the second application that we discussed at the last meeting, and this application was for Viking Industrial, and there were some outstanding items that we needed to address, all surrounding access. I understand that the applicant and team are here this evening, and so maybe we can invite them up to the table, as I do know the council has several questions for them. And then we can also update the council on our meeting with Anoka County today.
Good evening. Would
Good
you
evening.
Please give us your names and addresses again for the record, please.
Aaron Waller with RJ Ryan Construction, 1100 Mendota Heights Road, Mendota Heights.
Pull your mics closer to you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Carmack of Alliant Engineering. We're at 733 Marquette Avenue in Minneapolis.
William Norton. I'm the owner and president of Viking Industrial Center.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Earlier today, we had a meeting in Anoka County, as the direction from the city council at the last meeting was that we wanted to further look at short-term and long-term plans for access for this particular site. One of the issues here was that currently the applicant met with Anoka County initially. When we talked about access, there were several options on the table. The applicant indicated that the right-in, right-out was something that they would accept, knowing that perhaps long-term that we would have another leg to the traffic light, except that at that time, we didn't really go into a lot of detail. At the last meeting, the council felt that we should explore those opportunities so that we had a long-term plan in place, so that there were no surprises as to what the city wanted to do in the future. We had that meeting today at 1 o'clock with Anoka County, and Anoka County still supports the right-in, right-out, which is what is on their plans, understanding that we do want a long-term plan. One of the things that we did not talk about at the first meeting, but talked about at the council meeting, was the possibility of doing a U-turn at the traffic light. And I think we had some discussion, while the county didn't know whether or not you can actually do the U-turn, as they've not done the geometrics for it. But certainly at the time, as long as it met all the rules and regulations, they weren't objecting to a U-turn. And currently, it's not signed that you couldn't make a U-turn at that intersection. The takeaway from that was the applicant was going to go back and see if, per the template, that it would be able, whether or not the radius was there, and if not, the applicant then would look at to see what measures it would take to improve or cut the curb cut out just to make a better turning radius. The other thing we talked about, Bill, was this is a conditional use permit for, a plan unit development that, and operating under a conditional use permit. And I did indicate to them that we would have a development agreement, and that the development agreement would outline the short-term plan and the long-term plan for access. So we talked a little bit about cost, and we talked a little bit about traffic light, and there was a very short discussion about an alternative to the traffic light with the possibility of a roundabout. I think we ruled the roundabout out because that came with a price tag of $800,000. So earlier today, we had a discussion at the workshop level and really talked about the details about backage roads and what we would be looking at as a city. And I think the council has several questions for all of you, so I'll turn the floor over to them so that they can have a dialogue back and forth, and then we'll get a better idea from our attorney about the developers agreement as far as timing, and then what next steps to take.
Are you ready, man?
We're all set.
All right. Shelley or Janet, whoever made the list.
Well, actually, Elizabeth, you have a list. So we were going through all of the various options, and it became apparent very quickly that there were a lot of balls in the air and a lot of question marks. And so I asked if we could just one by one go through, like, what are all the open issues that we really need to address to come up with a short-term and a long-term plan, and there were a number of them. And so, Elizabeth, do you have that list in front of you?
I do. I was going to bring up the GIS. Because
Yeah, that would actually be really helpful, because I want to make
think
sure
it's easier to-
you're aware of them, because we don't have an answer to these questions, but there are a lot of questions.
Understood.
Yep. And some of them require your input, so the purpose of bringing them up is to get that input from you.
Okay, so we have about 9 items on our list, looking at the property from east to west. And looking at the property, the first thing, and some of these items we know that you're aware of, but the council wanted to have at least a dialogue on each of the issues on how they're going to be addressed. So the very first one was the driveway, and this driveway accessing the two landowners in the back, and how the driveway was going to be addressed.
You're up.
I believe Tom, who couldn't make it here tonight, he's on a vacation that he had previously planned, but Tom had sent some correspondence to them. I don't know if he's received an ultimate decision or feedback from them on what their opinion is as to a mutually agreeable option to relocate the driveway from a cost and that perspective, but right now those drive lanes are on Shirley's property. And they would need to be moved in order to make the improvements that we're proposing. So as of right now, we believe that the solution to that is a shared access agreement, as we've indicated on our plans. So having them feed into our entrance. And then that way, that would limit, we'd feel that would be more favorable to the city and to the county by limiting how many accesses come on to Lake Drive. Avoid having an extra one side by side there.
The second item was, and I did confirm with the Public Works Director, that there are some issues of utilities, and the utilities is to one site. The other site does not have utilities, and he has confirmed that there is sewer and water lines. There's some shallow at the right in, right out where you're proposing, and then there's a manhole, I believe, further along. And my understanding is that you thought that an easement agreement would cover those lines.
That falls within a setback or a normal area. That would be something that we could look at. Obviously, if it's there existing, I don't think that hurts the improvement that we're trying to make as long as it's not, too shallow where we would be limiting the cover. So a lot of, for instance, water lines, if they have water going back, they're not on a well, and if they have sanitary going back, that has to have a certain amount of cover over top of it. So we'd have to study with the civil's input what that elevation of those infrastructure, those two pieces of infrastructure are. But if there's no concern there, I can't speak for Tom and Bill, but I don't think that they would have an issue with that.
Mayor and council, can I clarify? So the issue of an additional easement is that the extension or relocation of those utilities would be outside of the existing right-of-way?
It's not right away, so this driveway accesses both these properties. So you see the lines here, there's 12 feet, and the driveway was supposed to be in the 12 feet. When they put the utilities in, they thought the driveway was on their easement, and they put the lines on this side
I see.
of the driveway. And so it services the home, so there is no right-of-way, it's a property line.
Okay,
This is-
I understand. So they need an easement to cover that.
Yeah, it's not platted, so there's no drainage and utility easements along the lines.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that point.
But I think the other uncertainty is that we know that it's shallow, but we don't know exactly how the slope is going to that manhole, so that might be an issue.
Dennis might be able to speak to this a little bit more, but it's pretty flat out there. We're not able to, the street is a set elevation, so we're not able to change that. That road going back to their access driveway is going to be fairly fixed. I doubt that there's going to be a cover issue, but it would just be something that would have to be looked at. Because our grade is going to meet at this property line, we're going to have to meet what's there. So with that being said, there's not going to be a drastic change with our site plan from what's near that property line now.
And it looks for the most part like where that existing driveway is, and where the utilities are, would be in a unpaved area of your site
Yes.
between the property line and the improvements.
There'll be a small landscape buffer there
So,
from our curb line to where the new drive lane would need to be. So I think that's fairly certain that there wouldn't be an issue with cover over top of those pipes.
they would be paving or driving on top of it, most likely.
I think that was mostly a point we wanted you to make sure you're aware of. And
Bringing up access, the driveway relocation along with utilities for the future with the next door neighbors, basically.
yeah,
The next item was, we had an opportunity to go to the site, and we see that there's the overhead line utility poles, and they're very close to your right in, right out. And we were wondering at this point whether there was a setback or whether you had explored with the utility company the idea that you were going to have this right in, right out so close to the poles.
I've talked to the utility transmission provider. We haven't submitted a full application yet for our easement that we need to operate underneath them, but from what I've described to them, I believe her name's Michelle, they indicated that there wasn't an issue with a drive lane being underneath it. I think they had to look at the monument sign, which also falls under that. It's technically a permanent structure, but that's a fairly minor.
And did you find that the poles were outside the drive triangle as far as, traffic?
Yes, we have on our as-built, they show the two transmission line poles there,
Okay.
and they're outside. They fall to the west of our drive lane, both of them.
Were you able to, the next one is the U-turn, and whether or not you were able to look at the turning radius at the traffic light?
We haven't yet. I did on my way into town. I came from that direction, and with full-size SUV was able to make it. I did have to pull out further into the intersection and do it, but I was able to do
Better than you.
I don't know if that was, if there were signs posted, I might have just incriminated myself.
There are no signs posted.
A post bail.
Let me add to that. So then if the county says they want you to extend the south side as you turn left, I guess there's 20 feet of right-of-way already controlled by the county.
Right.
But then you guys would be responsible to pay for widening that
I think
turn lane if necessary.
I'd like to know how much money is involved, but yes, I think we would be willing to work with that.
Yeah.
or others would have to find another route to get out of there. And over time, I'm sure your local police department would benefit from tickets if it became an illegal U-turn, and you'd pick up revenue in that form and fashion.
But actually, it's not illegal, correct?
Right now, it's not posted, so it's not allowed, but as you saw, you have to pull into the intersection in order to do the U-turn, which is generally not customary when you're driving. You tend not to do that. You try to make as tight a turn as you can, and when we tried to make a tight a turn as we can, we did come up to the curb.
Yeah,
It's a safety issue, though. I mean, if you come and you do the turn and you can't make it and you have to back up, I mean, that takes some time, and that's a fairly busy road, so.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, I was able to do it, but if you weren't fluid with the motion, it could be problematic. So if we had to, I don't think moving a traffic light would be a very, very easy thing to accomplish financially, but if it became just to making that radius a little bit larger radius, so that there was a little bit more forgiveness when they came around that would probably be a pretty easy solution. Further engineering required, but I think just widening that corner would be a pretty easy solution.
The last thing I would want is for our company to get a reputation of it's hard to get to, or that it's Ticket City if you come near it. So it's in our, frankly, selfish interest to work with you to fix that.
Very good.
We just want to make sure you knew that was a dollar item.
No, it's not the only one.
I hear you. I hear you.
You know, the last four items all have to do, we initially talked about all of the short-term plans, which is, you know, the U-turn, you're right in, right out for access. And I know that you had submitted a plan, and the plan shows the different truck routes that you thought for your tractor-trailer trucks, and I know that we talked that there would be like 2 and 12 deliveries 5 days a week.
May I, I talked to Tom and checked with my staff. An average of 3 a day of semi-trucks coming through. Could be 2, could be none, could be 5, but usually about 3.
Okay. And I think one of the options that we talked about, I did present at the workshop, you had 3 different options. The first option was looking at Zurich Street, the second option was turning around at Camp 3, and the other one was directing your people to go down to 35W, and if they were using 35W, continuing down Lake Drive. And I think that the first option, we had a little discussion, and I think the council was amenable to your synopsis that it was a local delivery, and that, in fact, if your drivers showed that they made a local delivery to your address, that they would be allowed to use Zurich Street. So I think for the short-term issues, that's what covered the short-term issues. The long-term issues, or I take it back, there's one other, which is the house encroachment. And so, for their purposes, it is your intention to take the entire house down, correct? And
Yes.
getting permission from the adjacent property owner to,
We're working on it. As you might be aware, the house is sitting on the boundary line. And there's been a lot of jokes about using a Sawzall and all this nonsense, but we will work accordingly to make sure that everything is copacetic, let me put it that way.
So the other three items have to do with the long-term plan. And the long-term plan is building the fourth leg of the traffic light and having a backage road, because it is the intent and long-term plan to have local access come off a local access road and to bring traffic to the traffic light so they could make left and right turns. And so looking at that, again, we will have the cost long-term of the fourth leg of the traffic light. Looking at acquiring the right-of-way both from Zurich Street north along your westerly boundary, well, not within your boundaries, but adjoining your boundaries, which is the property next to yours, for the full length of that property. And then the north line, we would have an east-west road. And I know we talked earlier about the city acquiring an easement along the north 30 feet for that future road. And then the last thing was making sure that your building and your drive routes within your design could operate if, in other words, if the right-in, right-out went away someday, and you had to take your access off of the local road, that the configuration to your lot would be able to go to that road. And I know that there are some developments where they would have like turned the building around, or they would have put a different side to it if they knew long-term that that was going to be their access. And basically, they'd be addressed off that road. And I know initially you'll have a Lake Drive address, but generally, for emergency purposes, when you take your access or you have your main access off a local road, then your address does change, and that's what's used for police, fire, emergency management and such. So knowing that long-term, we would be looking at backage roads to access both properties behind you and your property, making sure that your planning for your current building takes that into consideration.
I'm smiling because our existing location, which has the mailing address of 710 Raymond, is known locally into the post office as 2347 Myrtle. We already have two addresses, so been there, done that. We're used to it. We can handle it.
I think we're going to go back and study a little bit. There's not going to be much for deviation if we are going to design this to have a front-facing street on this side. This is, the west side of this building does have the better finish when you're looking at whether you have a front of office space like this or docks. We already have the better side of the building facing Zurich's future extension through there. It just may change how we slightly modify our parking lot, but I think that would be
That was the list that I had put together, but if there's other questions from the council.
Wasn't there a question about the ponding and the access for the ponding?
You know, I know that we talked about the northerly 30 feet. I did talk to the engineer, and he said that, so we have two different road sections in Columbus. If it's in a rural area, it's 66 feet wide, and it's got a rural road ditch. And then there's an urban design, and the right-of-way is 60 feet. And he indicated that he thought this would be an urban road, and so it would be 60 feet wide. And so originally, I think we talked about a 33-foot easement, where in this case, it would only be 30 feet. And looking at the northerly border, and I know that earlier we talked and you had ponding, and so I did share with them that you had ponding already in that area, and that there would probably have to be some alternatives to putting ponding along the northerly border if you knew that there was going to be a future road there.
If we lost that area for ponding, that would be a significant problem for, if we had to design around it now and there was a restriction put on using that area for a detention pond for a future road, that would have a cost impact that we would have to assess, as there would be a storm retention tank system that would likely be needed. And and those have significant costs and also maintenance, yearly upkeep associated with them.
And that's because you don't have enough volume in order to, or area, or what's the,
Yeah, this is where I'll call on Mark, but it's all based off of how much impervious pavement and surfaces that you have. So this roof doesn't absorb water anymore, the parking lot doesn't absorb water anymore. So if we had to, this water all has to be stored on site. And if we limit our ponding areas, or eliminate them, because that's the best spot on the site for it, we would then be forced to look at some other means of infiltration, which could be costly. It doesn't mean it triggers us into that. That's what we'd have to look at.
Just a quick review of your site plan, I would say that if you had to dedicate that 30 feet and move your pond south, you could do it, but you would lose half of your future expansion area perhaps. But it would fit, but you would lose some of that.
Future expansion, that would also come with the likelihood that they probably want the extra parking space. So it's a compounding problem where we have proof of parking on the west side. If you, the hatched area, they've got similar to the future expansion, they've got proof of parking.
I think, Mr. Mayor and Council, not to get too far into the legal requirements, but I think what we would do is look at that as a total cost of the road project and then allocate it to the benefited parties and any funding sources we would have. We'd also look at, I think, from an engineering standpoint, you'd look at minimizing those costs for impacting their site. Because we can request an easement, but we can't request that they start dedicating rights that really benefit, multiple property owners. So there's a balance there. It's one thing to draw a line on paper and say an easement's going to go through here. It's another to say you're going to start taking developable area. I mean, that should be shared by all the benefited properties.
So I think it came up in the context of what would have to be accommodated now for the long-term plan. And if I'm understanding correctly, where we would put the road would then go through your ponds. So the ponds would have to be somewhere else, or we would likely not be able to do the road because it would be too expensive to move the ponds.
At that point, that would just be a design change that we'd work through with it'd be two civil firms. It'd be TKD or whoever they decided to work with to hire for the city, and our project team, civil engineer, who would find a solution. I mean, we do subsurface tanks all the time. They're costly. They don't work as good as everybody wants them to.
so, go ahead.
My only point is that under a development impacts analysis, we would have to tie back those cost impacts on their property to the development itself. And if we can't do that, it has to be picked up by other sources. So there's a line, that we have to be cognizant of, if we start to require them to move the ponds, that becomes a cost of the road project. And I appreciate that it had costs, but I just want to lay that out early so we didn't think it was just kind of an open door.
So Dennis, looking at the overall development agreement, and I know we're not going to resolve issues tonight, but if we were thinking outside the box and we knew where the right-of-way had to go just in order to accommodate the lots, and we know that when we build the road or the fourth leg, we know we have to have our own stormwater ponds in order to take on that water, is there a way to something like what we did for Hy-Vee, it takes care of their water, it takes care of the road water. We know that there's a storm pond that might accommodate, both for storage, because we're going to have to build a larger pond anyway for the road storage.
Yeah, ideally, if you look at the northeast quadrant as an example, you would look at this whole area, maybe design one or two regional ponds that would serve both the public infrastructure and private. There's probably a more significant timing issue here. So if we were just looking at stormwater ponding for the road infrastructure, the city would have to probably purchase some additional property when you purchase the road, the other parcel for the road easement. Because you're going to need to treat the roadway stormwater somewhere. But if you start combining them, then you're getting into bigger analysis of the whole area. And again, just by looking at their site plan, they could accommodate, in my opinion, that easement on the north side of the property by moving the pond south. But again, it might impact their future expansion area.
And that's where I was going. So for them not to bear the expense of this alternate storage tank and such, because that's costly, if we said, yes, we're going to have a road easement, move your pond southerly so we have the road, and then we reserve some storage in our ponds, you know what I mean? We're switching out road right-of-way for pond storage.
Yeah,
Water
similar
storage.
to the northeast quadrant, they would need to
Yeah.
contribute to that
And we did something similar.
ponding area.
Yeah, and that could be handled in a development agreement, as long as we can allocate whose water and how much, we can always get to what is a fair share. And I'm comfortable we can do that. I just wanted to make sure that we thought about that early as we put together this development agreement.
Understood. When I had talked to Tom, had asked him what was going on with the pond, and he said there was some way you swap out and pay for the pond elsewhere, in effect.
Yep.
By the way, he did get a deer, bow and arrow hunting up north.
When I said vacation, he was hunting.
So I have a question, Dennis. So we're gonna, if everything went like everyone would hope, we put a road right there. Then what do we have to do? Dig out the rest of the highland to make catch basins for our water off of the road and possibly for their water off of,
Right, if you start combining stormwater needs from the private parcels, then you would be having a larger pond. We haven't looked at any of this for grades and drainage, if that's even possible. Assuming it is, you would need, so the other option is each development takes care of its own ponding, like they're proposing to do, then the city just needs to take care of the ponding for the street, which would be a smaller area, but it still needs some additional area. But if you start combining the ponds for all the private, you're gonna end up with needing a sizable parcel.
I think a middle ground would be that we would have a mechanism, if the owner is willing to dedicate the easement where we need it, the pond can sit there until we need it, and then we replace only their share. We don't have to, create a regional pond system that picks up all of the properties necessarily. I mean, that's kind of the quid pro quo, I mean, it's in the news a lot lately, is that,
And we're actually admitting there is one in this case.
well, I should not have used that example. The exchange is that because we're asking for a property right on their property, then we make up the cost impact for utilizing that easement. So there's,
If 50% of the pond has to go away because we are putting in a street, then 50% street.
correct.
Yeah.
Had it been, I know this is preliminary for the street on the north side of the property, but had it been looked at, having to extend that further to the north, and this wouldn't probably be answered now, but to put the street entirely on the 9227 property, and then you could also use that property as the slope drains that way for regional pond. Instead of splitting properties. Because their houses, if you decide to build that house is within 30 feet of that property line already.
This area has not been analyzed for any
Yeah.
of these things we're talking about right now.
And if I may, I think what we're really talking about is making sure we don't foreclose anything. We have no idea exactly how fast this is going to happen. It could be 10 years that there's a stub there or nothing at all.
And knowing that it impacts the dollars again.
I appreciate the heads up and what you're telling me.
It is our intent not to have housing in this district. It is a commercial area.
anyone have anything more to add or discuss?
We are closing on it tomorrow. So I'm putting up my money where my mouth is. And I think there's a $33,000 easement that I owe you, or not easement, but assessment, that will be coming your way shortly. So we're eager to get going, and we understand there's some contingencies and so forth, but we're eager to get going.
Aaron, can you, what they have before them is, you had sent this email earlier this week, and so I do have that before them.
Yeah, so we updated the elevations on the building to show the other facades, the east, west, and north, which weren't depicted earlier, in color. As of right now, the design has about 3/4 of the building in this charcoal gray panel, the other quarter of it with a white precast panel. And I've done close-up views of what those colors look like in some pictures, and then also from our company drone did a same exact color of the building in St. Paul, so you can see the contrast of the picture up close. It doesn't look much different when you look at it side by side, and the one from the drone, you can see the vast contrast.
I'm gonna put this one.
Just the drone.
I don't think that's in the packet. I think it's going to go up on the screen.
And I think in the subsequent pages is the gray and the white. Panels.
Close-up photos of what the material looks like. Again, this is a maintenance-free product that never needs to be painted. The only thing you have to do with the precast panels come out.
This is the difference between the two then? This is the white and this is the gray?
Yeah, so that when you look at it, it doesn't look like there's a big difference, and that's probably because it's a photo, but when you go to this picture,
We can just put it up if you want to bring it up.
Yeah, that picture, I don't think it's part of it.
That's fine.
as well as they do in the elevation.
Very good.
So did I understand the south elevation is what's going to be facing Zurich Lake?
This elevation is what will be facing lake.
Okay. I thought I heard you say earlier that you had configured it so that the front would be facing what, New Zurich?
What I was trying to highlight was that is that on this elevation here, this is the west elevation. This would be more favorable to have facing Zurich than would
The dock.
East? Okay, I got it. I misunderstood. I was thinking you were having the front of the building facing. Okay,
this side of the building was designed with it in mind, buildings, but multiple spaces for flexibility. So, I mean, we build buildings like this often that are built in retail and industrial areas that are able to split them so that they can have multiple tenants selling multiple different things all in the same building.
okay.
That's not their intent, but
Okay.
That's an option. Anyone have anything more? If not, we're ready for a motion.
And the motion would include a development agreement with the applicant, as well as the other conditions in the report.
And in this particular case, I see that there needs to be an amendment here. This is a conditional use permit for a plan unit development, not a conditional use permit for amendment.
So Elizabeth, can we just use the motion as written if we add in for,
The motion as written, you just have to omit amendment. It's a conditional use permit at that address for a plan unit development. I got carried away with amendments.
But subject to,
It is subject to a developer's agreement and the conditions that are listed in the planner and engineer's report. And I didn't know if there was going to be any conditions that we added this evening. And from what I understand, we have accepted the new building elevations that were presented this evening.
Is there a date on these? It'd just be good to get into the record the date of the plans. They were submitted,
Would you be able to use the date that I sent them?
Yes.
It doesn't have the date on the drawings.
okay, let's indicate what the date is, and then let's get a set of plans with the date on so they correspond.
the 23rd.
Follow back and.
Let's just date them as of today. Let's date them as of today and make sure the plan set comes in with them. Yep. We get lots of plans and we want to make sure we can look back. They will be attached to the agreement, but
Is there anything that we talked about in my list of 8 or 10 things that you felt needed to be included in any of the conditions? Because,
let me just interject.
sure,
It was my intent, since I saw general concurrence on these issues, to draft these into the development agreement.
okay.
And that way, they'll have a chance to look and see what the language is, if that's okay with the council.
And then do we have, I'm sorry, do we have a planner's report and engineer's report?
Yes.
And-
And that was in the agenda at the last meeting.
Okay, so we don't have it in our packet this time. Okay. I'm not making this motion. I've made
Okay.
all the rest of
I will
them.
try, and people can help me along the way. All right. Make a motion to move to approve the conditional use permit at 9203 Lake Drive for a planning unit development to allow a retail office business subject to a developer agreement, and the conditions listed in the planner's report, engineer's report, and the conditions discussed during the meeting, subject to, we already said the developer agreement, right?
Right.
And also approve, do we want to do the elevations at this point? And
We're going to include.
separate?
No, we're going to include that as part of the approval dated 10/23, and they'll get us a set of plans.
Okay,
10/23.
all right. And subject to elevations submitted 10/23/19.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Just a general point, the process that we follow for a developer's agreement is our attorney will now do a draft development agreement. Then we will have a developer meeting where he and I will be at that meeting, and then whoever you decide at that meeting, you will have had an opportunity to read the developer's agreement. You'll identify which you don't agree with or you have issues with. We'll discuss through those points. Once we agree with the developer's agreement and all the exhibits, it will come back before the council, and the council then will approve the developer's agreement.
Understood.
Questions?
Apologize, I'm coming off a cold. I was with 11 grandkids or Petri dishes.
Thank you for coming in. Good luck tomorrow.
I've been keeping my distance from you folks, too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work.
Yep, thank you, guys. Now we're down to number 10, public open forum. Would anyone like to speak at public open forum? If not, we'll move on to number 11, direction and motion for the Rice Creek Watershed appointment, pages 22 and 25 in our packet.
Do you just need a motion? Or do we need to discuss?
We just make the motion.
You can.
So I'll move to send a letter of support for Patricia Priner to Anoka County for reappointment to the Rice Creek Watershed District.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Number 12, the motion to approve the Columbus 2040 Comprehensive Plan, pages 8, 9, and 10 in our additions.
What's the resolution number?
It's Resolution 1930.
I'll move to approve Resolution 1930, approving the Columbus 2040 Comprehensive Plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're on to letter D, staff and consultant reports. Engineer.
Yes, no formal report, but just a couple updates on a couple projects still under construction. Hornsby Street North is all been gravelled. If the weather will ever cooperate, we'll get curb and gutter in and get it paved. Friday and Saturday is supposed to be nice, but next week doesn't look so hot. And we also are still completing the Southwest Utility Project, getting the lift station panel next week to get installed, and the access road still remains. So that's a brief report.
Thank you. Attorney report.
Mr. Mayor and Council, you have the development agreement for Thornbeck Preserve Second Edition, the developers in the audience. I understand at your earlier meeting, you went through some of the background on the development agreement, so I'm just...
We ran out of time.
Oh, you ran out of time. Okay, well, we will run through some background then. I understand that you did not have time to complete this. So this is a standard development agreement. We use these to ensure that public improvements are constructed to specifications. It provides a very significant surety, which was delivered this evening, for those improvements. It provides for the cost of inspection by the city engineer. And then there are a couple of unique aspects about this development that I'm going to let Elizabeth address because she's a little more familiar with them, but they go to some of the height of construction of accessory buildings and so forth.
So in looking at this particular development agreement, we have two things that are a little, I won't say unique, but things that are things that we should look at. The first one is that this developer, while he has private roads, which he understands that he is responsible for improving, there is a city road, which is Furman Street, that we will do another public improvement on. And in this particular case, he has indicated that he has given us the dollars towards that road in order to do the public improvement. And we can talk about that as to when we're going to do that public improvement next year at a future meeting. I've talked to Jim, and the question that you will have to think about over the next couple of weeks is, to what extent are we going to improve Furman Street? Are we going to just improve the street to the end of this project, or are we going to go to 165th? And if we go to 165th, holding a neighborhood meeting and then assessing the rest of the street, and we're talking about a half a mile. And we can talk about that in the future. The developer has, in the development agreement, has indicated what he's willing to contribute towards the project, and then it's up to the council to order the project, because we have to go out for public bid.
Can I clarify one thing?
Yes.
When Elizabeth says private streets, she means the developer is going to install the streets. They will be turned over to the city to become public streets. I just want to be clear.
Exactly.
Yep, okay.
The other thing that's a little bit different in this particular case, the developer is using piezometers to do the low floor elevations on each of the homes. And in the first phase, we did the same thing, and he agreed that he would be, monitor the piezometer levels, and he would build 5 feet above the water elevation that was monitored. And what we didn't do in that particular development was, although the house is at the piezometer level, the accessory buildings weren't included, and so when people came back, we required them to be 2 feet above modeled soil. And so what you have a little bit is a disparity in that development of where accessory buildings are and where house levels are. In that particular case, even though the septic systems are all 1 foot above modeled. So what the developer asked to do in phase 2 was whether or not he could use the piezometer readings for the accessory buildings. And so we looked at it, and we talked as a city staff, and what I indicated to them was, if you showed us where the areas that would meet that criteria, then when we approve the developer's agreement, the blue areas that would be identified would be the accessory building areas that we would allow that to happen. And so in the exhibit, he's provided that exhibit, and I do think that it'll be a great tool, because from the get-go, then when they buy the lot, they know exactly where an accessory building could go. So there's no surprise, you know what I mean, whether that lot could accommodate one, whether it couldn't accommodate, how far above model soil it's going to be, or I'm sorry, piezometer level soil. And to me, it's a good thing. And
That's Exhibit G, and it's gray in this, exhibit. It's not color, but. And one additional thing that is a little bit of a variance from how we do things, and maybe the engineer will want to address this, but we did provide for some flexibility to construct homes on unimproved, well, partially improved streets, I should say, because there's a recommendation to do 1 lift of asphalt rather than 2, is that right? I mean, 2 lifts, but at the same time, right? You better explain it, I'm not the engineer.
Yeah, it was depending on the timing of when the model home or other homes want to be built. So if that is going to be done prior to full paving, then we talked about having a thicker road section if they're driving construction equipment on just the gravel road bed. But what we did in phase 1, which we, after looking at the construction season going through, decided not to do, was not to just do 1 lift of pavement and then have construction equipment driving on it before we pave the final lift. So it's either both or none.
And so the provision, and I don't have it right in front of me, but essentially what the provision provides for is that if the developer wants to utilize a gravel base, then the engineer has to be involved to make sure that their gravel base isn't essentially sinking in the ground. So it may require that the developer actually spend more money ensuring that that gravel base is going to stand up over a season. And so you'll have to make an election, basically, whether that cost is worth getting home sites started early. But the engineer would have to be involved in making sure that that road section can hold up over a season of construction.
Right, or you may elect to just pave everything to the final lift and then start home building.
So that's in the agreement, I just haven't found the paragraph.
The very last thing is very unique to this project is the project landed in two different watershed districts. And we do have sunrise rules in part of the project and Rice Creek rules in the other. We came to a joint powers agreement between both entities, and that is in the developer's agreement. The actual agreement is not there, but the agreement has been approved through both jurisdictions. And instead of separating backyards and front yards, we came to an agreement that the road was the boundary in between the two jurisdictions. And so that is unique to this development, that we have a boundary change between watershed districts.
Up to the table, please.
There is still two watershed districts within this. It's just that
Yes.
now it's clean by the road rather than through a person's house.
Correct. At one point, it was like the back roof was in one and the front roof was in another, and, yeah.
Yeah.
And which watersheds are they?
Sunrise Water Maintenance Organization, which is Sunrise and Rice Creek.
Yeah, I just, hopefully I'm not confused on this paving. And we've talked several different options. But I still thought we were gonna do a first lift and then get our majority of our homes built and then do a second lift.
That's what, in conversations with Public Works Superintendent, we did not want to do because there could be damage to the first lift because the road doesn't have all its full structural section at that point.
And so what we discussed, Tom, in our meeting was to give you the flexibility to build off of the gravel road, but we'd have to make sure that it's going to hold up. And so that involves a little bit of extra engineering, or at least engineering review. So that was the trade-off.
It was extra gravel and fabric, I believe.
Well, yeah, that was, and what I understood was is if we were gonna build out the gravel road, that Dennis was gonna require fabric be put down, which is a lot more expense. And I was under the understanding that, and then I had made the decision in my mind at least, that I wasn't gonna go forward because that was unaffordable. So we were gonna wait for for spring to get the first lift. But in the developer's agreement, it says I can get one permit for a model home, and I was gonna go forward with that.
Correct.
And then, I guess my only concern is, I've never done a development where we put both lifts on because, unfortunately, it's pretty much guaranteed it's gonna get scarred up, and then it's gonna be an item at the end we're gonna have to deal with, and I don't.
Yeah, and we had discussed that, and again, City Public Works was okay with doing that rather than there wasn't much scar damage in the first phase,
Well, we did the final lift,
but
we're
after,
done.
right.
We haven't built the house since we put the final lift on.
But on the first lift, when you had
Yeah.
all the houses built, there wasn't much scarring damage, but there was some structural damage. So we'd rather have the final lift on and not have the structual damage. I thought that's what we had
Well, we had a
understood.
discussion at Bill's office, and then I was out, and I guess if it's in there, I didn't catch it, I'll be honest with you. I'm just really concerned with that because I said I've done this a time or two, and I'm not the only person in there. And if it gets scarred up, I'm sure you're gonna say, hey, Tom, what are you gonna do? And I'm gonna go like, oh, what am I gonna do?
Yeah, I think only if there's physical structural damage.
Okay, write that down. Okay. So, is it still fabric that's gonna be the answer if we wanna build off the gravel, or is it gonna be analyzed once because if we're gonna run on it, if we're gonna have, I don't, what I'm asking, I guess, is I don't wanna run on straight gravel I can't afford to put fabric under the road. I can't do that. So what I'm asking is, again, my game plan was to do, when I left the meeting, was to do the one model and then pave before we started with the rest to not be in that situation. Is it changed? Is your opinion changed at all? If we go on gravel where we're not going through a freeze-thaw type situation, can we run on the gravel during the summer? And you think that's good or bad, or?
So you said you're going to do a model, but then you were going to pave before you started any other construction?
That was my game plan when we left the meeting because we was unaffordable.
I think we're on the same page, but it would just be
Okay.
paving both lifts.
Okay. Okay.
And you were thinking just to pave one lift?
Well, yeah, normally, and I don't blame you, everybody's got a different game plan, but normally we just put that first lift on like we did, and then if it gets dinged up, you know, obviously we have to fix it and so forth. And you did thicken your road section, so hopefully this one would hold up better than the last one, because we did have some breakup in some areas. But if that's what you guys want, I mean, we'll do it, but I'm just super worried about, you know, it could be the utility guy, it could be anyone that scars the road up, and that's the final lift. And right now, our final lift is pristine because, and it worked out timing-wise because we kind of finished all the houses and we haven't really, we got, you know, we still have a few more lots in there, but we haven't, it's just like the day it was put down. That's all I'm concerned about, is to have that final lift get dinged up for any reason.
That was Public Works' desire.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I think, didn't we actually change road standards in this last season?
Yeah.
Right, that's what he just mentioned. We made a thicker section,
Gravel under it.
be more
Yeah.
consistent.
But did we also go to just one lift? I mean, not one lift, but two lifts together?
That's not written
spelled
down
out.
anywhere in a policy. It's just practice.
Okay, well, I don't need to waste any more time on this because I think we can sort this out. I just want to give you my concerns, and then I guess that's about it, so. And we'll just have to figure it out. All right. Anything else for me?
Elizabeth, can you just comment on the timing on the Furman improvement?
You know, Furman will be a 2020 project, and depending on when we get the project ready and order the project, we have to go through the Chapter 429 process. We're probably behind if we were going to do a spring build, which is why I think it'll be a late, summer build, because right now we would have had to been pretty far in the process to do that. And so I'm thinking it's going to be sometime in 2020.
But we budgeted for this,
This is a special assessment project.
so the assessing to the landowners.
Yes.
Got it, okay, thanks.
Shelley, do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, make a motion to move to approve Thornbeck Preserve Second Edition Development Agreement as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Mayor and city council members report. Denny?
Nothing to report.
Jen?
I just have one thing I want to mention, and it was a kudos to Leon. So I know our building inspector probably doesn't get a lot of pats on his back, but I have a neighbor who just sold their house and recognized later in the process that he was going to have to upgrade the septic system. And so they had lots and lots of questions because they were getting different answers or different directions from a couple of different contractors. And so I suggested he call Leon and get the city's perspective on what needed to be done. And they did end up having to upgrade their septic, but they had nothing but praises for Leon and how responsive he was and how helpful he was. And we often hear how frustrated people are. He has a hard job, so I just thought I would bring that forward and give him the recognition he deserves. They were very, very pleased working with him.
There you go. Shelley?
Nothing.
And I have nothing. And so Public Works has gone home already. Jessica?
No report tonight.
All right. Elizabeth?
I only have one topic, and that was the topic moving forward from the workshop, and that was the fact that we came to a consensus that we would submit the application for the DNR grant and move forward with the acquiring of the LRIP dollars at the legislature, and also looking at legislative service, meaning lobbying service, through Larkin Hoffman. And I've prepared a motion for that in order to move forward.
Really?
I'm channeling Jeff now.
Oh, no, don't do that.
Okay. Make a motion, move to approve the submittal of application for DNR grant program. Communicate to Canoka County that the city will pursue the acquisition of the remaining LIRP grant funds at the legislature for Northwest Freeway Drive with legislative services from Margaret Vessel at Larkin Hoffman for the sum of $10,000 per month for 5 months.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Oh,
I was just going to have a discussion. So Bill, can you just walk them through what Margaret,
Sure.
I mean, I put Margaret in there, but
Margaret, and actually a team working with Margaret, so it doesn't matter how many people are on the team, the price is still the same. There's a legislative team up there, and what they will do is they'll reach out to the county, just as soon as Elizabeth wants her to do that. She has actually worked for the county in the past, so she's got good relations with the county staff. And they will put together a bill to be introduced on behalf of the city to clarify that that LRIP money can be used in this project. And then they'll take it through the various committees and see it through to the end. And hopefully it's non-controversial and gets done this year. And it always depends on if there's a bill and a transportation bill and, you know, so do we get assumed into a larger thing or do we go freestanding? Those are all kind of strategy points, but that's generally how it works. And we've been successful with the LRIP money. We've been successful working with the county, so there's no reason to think we couldn't get this done.
We have a second?
you have a second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I have nothing further.
Nothing further? Well, then we're just winding it down. Would someone like to make a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
City Council Workshop 1023, that was